There is something deeply mysterious about the way God protects his children, not always with fire from heaven, not always with miraculous escape, but often in subtle and quiet ways, ways so delicate that even you may not recognize them at first. One of the clearest signs that God is intervening on your behalf is when the attacks of your enemies begin to lose power without any natural explanation. The things they said used to sting, the traps they set used to catch, the accusations used to echo.
But now?
Their words fall flat. Their plans unravel. Their energy seems misdirected. And you did nothing to cause it. You didn't raise a hand, didn't fight back, didn't expose them, and still they falter. Why? Because God got involved in ways you may never see. Spiritual warfare often works through strategy and influence, not merely noise and aggression. Your enemies may still speak, but their voice carries no weight. They may still try to organize against you, but their unity is fractured. They may still attempt to damage your reputation, but no one listens with seriousness. This collapse is not the result of your cleverness. It is the divine dismantling of a structure built on pride and injustice. God in his righteousness does not need your rage. He only needs your trust. When you remain in integrity, your silence becomes your strength and your restraint becomes your testimony. God takes over when you surrender the battle to him, and what seemed like slow suffering turns into strategic deliverance. There is a passage in Scripture where the enemies of Israel turn on each other, and Israel is left in awe, watching the battle fall apart from a distance. This is not an isolated biblical moment. It is a divine pattern. God has a history of intervening in conflict, not by eliminating the enemy outright, but by causing their unity to dissolve, their timing to misalign, their plans to implode. He confuses their counsel. He hardens the heart of the oppressor for a time only to set up a greater fall. He allows them to build higher and higher until they collapse under the weight of their own arrogance. When you see your enemy's attacks losing force without retaliation on your part, that is not coincidence. It is God. And here's what's most humbling. God often shields you from seeing the full extent of what could have happened. You don't see all the emails they sent, all the backroom conversations, all the plots and private jealousy. You just start to notice things shifting. Opportunities they tried to block start opening. People they tried to turn against you start seeing through the lies. Conversations that once felt heavy are now light. You didn't defend yourself. God defended you through divine interference. He blocked what you never even knew was aimed at you. And while your enemies stand in confusion, wondering why their efforts seem powerless, you stand in peace, not because you're untouchable, but because you're protected. What's even more profound is how often this collapse happens quietly. You won't always hear thunder. There may be no public vindication, but suddenly you begin to walk through doors that were once locked. The gossip loses traction. The slander loses influence. Their tactics become tired and ineffective. And deep down, even they know something has shifted. God is not loud about justice, but he is exact. And when he chooses to scatter the plans of your enemies, he does it in a way that leaves no fingerprints, only results. He clears your name in ways you never imagined. He turns their stones into stepping stones for your next level. This divine reversal often humbles you more than it excites you, because when you see God dismantle something without your hand, you realize it was never your strength that preserved you. It was mercy. You begin to weep not for what they said, but for how close you came to collapse and didn't even know it. You see God not as your bodyguard, but as your Father, quietly walking beside you, removing daggers from your path before you ever stepped on them. This is the God who shuts the mouths of lions, often without roaring himself. So what should your response be? Not gloating, not boasting, but deeper trust, deeper humility. When their attacks start to fail, it is not your cue to laugh. It is your cue to worship, because it means God has heard the silent cries, seen the hidden betrayals, and answered in his own way. His vengeance is not about crushing people, it's about protecting purpose. And when you stay rooted in that purpose, he becomes your defense, your advocate, and your shield. In the end, the collapse of their plans is not your victory, it is God's glory. He allowed the opposition to rise, not to break you, but to reveal who truly fights for you. The attack's failing is not just a sign of your strength, it's a sign of his presence. So stay faithful, stay still. You don't have to prove your innocence, elevate your voice, or expose every plot. If the weapons form didn't prosper, it's because the hand of God was already in motion long before you even knew you were under attack. There comes a moment in the life of the believer when everything externally appears to be unraveling. Relationships strained, doors closing, accusations swirling, finances unstable, and yet internally there is no panic. There is no breakdown. There is no breakdown. Instead, there is a strange, almost unnatural stillness, a peace that should not make sense under the circumstances. This is not the peace of denial. It is not ignorance of reality. It is the unmistakable evidence that God is with you, anchoring your soul even while the winds of conflict howl around you. It's not that the chaos isn't real. It is. But so is the stillness inside you. And that stillness is more powerful than the storm. This is the kind of peace Christ had when he slept in the boat during the violent storm. The disciples were terrified, running in fear, shouting about death. And Jesus, knowing exactly who he was and who his Father was, remained asleep. Not because the storm wasn't dangerous, but because he was anchored in a deeper truth. That is what God does when he handles your enemies. He doesn't always change the external situation immediately. Sometimes he changes you. He fortifies your interior life until the chaos loses its grip on your spirit, and that peace becomes your proof that God is near. It's hard to explain to others. People expect you to be frantic. They expect you to retaliate, to gossip in return, to lose sleep, to panic. But you don't. In fact, you find yourself praying for those who hurt you. You find yourself sleeping deeply when you should be tossing in fear. You find joy in small things even though major things are unsettled. This confuses your enemies, and sometimes even your friends. But that strange peace is not naivety. It is the armor of God placed on your spirit. It means you've given up the illusion of control and placed everything into hands far more capable than yours. This peace is not loud. It does not draw attention to itself, but it radiates from you in quiet strength. It allows you to walk into hostile environments without shrinking. It lets you show up to places where your name was slandered and still carry your head high. That's not pride, that's clarity. That's confidence that doesn't come from self, but from surrender. You are not walking in peace because everything is perfect. You are walking in peace because you know the one who governs outcomes, and you trust him more than your fears. That trust silences the noise. That trust tames your anxiety. That trust becomes your power. And here's what many miss. This peace is a weapon, not against people, but against despair. It protects your mind from spiraling. It guards your heart from hatred. It stops you from becoming like those who tried to harm you. Yeah. Without it, the chaos would win, not by defeating your body, but by poisoning your soul. But with God's peace, you rise above. You bless those who curse you. You serve while you're still bleeding. You walk through the valley of the shadow of death and fear no evil, not because evil isn't present, but because peace is louder inside you than fear is outside of you. You begin to understand that peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence of God. It is the still, small voice that reminds you who you are when the world tries to redefine you through betrayal, attack, or rejection. That voice speaks over the noise. It whispers reassurance when you feel forgotten. It says, "You are mine. I am with you. They will not win. I will not fail." And those words settle into your bones. They hold you when nothing else does. They steady you when the ground feels unstable. They become the compass when all other signs are misleading. Eventually, that peace becomes so embedded in you that the chaos no longer has the same power. You stop needing to explain yourself. You stop craving vindication. You stop rehearsing arguments in your mind. Instead, you practice gratitude. You sing while you wait. You give even when you're under attack. That kind of response is not natural. It is supernatural. It is the evidence that the Spirit of God is active in your life, handling your enemies while handling you. Because what good is it to silence your enemy if your soul is still in turmoil? God does both. He silences them, and he stills you. So if you find yourself surrounded by conflict but strangely at peace, do not be confused. That is not numbness. That is not avoidance. That is divine confirmation. It is God's whisper above the storm saying, "I'm already at work. Be still. Don't move from trust. Don't leave your post. Don't match their chaos with chaos. Let me handle it." And when you obey that stillness, you will walk through the fire without smelling like smoke. You will face opposition and still overflow with light. And in the end, your peace will speak louder than their noise ever could. There is a sacred mystery in how God lifts up his people, not in secrecy but in sight. For a long time you may walk hidden, overlooked, misunderstood, humiliated even. You may wonder why your gifts are buried, why your voice is silenced, why the favor seems delayed. Favor seems delayed. But in due time, God does something unmistakable. He begins to elevate you in ways no human could orchestrate. He places you in positions you weren't supposed to reach. He opens platforms you weren't qualified for. And when he does it publicly. Not for your glory, but for his. So that those who once questioned you, and even you who once doubted yourself, would know this was the hand of God. This is not about fame. It is not about applause. Public elevation in the kingdom of God is not performance. It is placement. It is God declaring to your enemies, to your environment, and even to your past, "This one is mine. Watch what I do with the stone you rejected." Like Joseph thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, forgotten in prison, God eventually calls you out in front of those who buried you. And he doesn't whisper your name in back rooms. He speaks it in front of Pharaoh, in front of those who thought you were finished. That moment of elevation isn't just a breakthrough, it's divine vindication. But before elevation comes humiliation. That is often the divine pattern. The crown follows the cross. God allows you to taste rejection so that when you rise without arrogance. You rise with compassion, with memory, with integrity. He purifies your heart in the shadows so that when the light hits you, you're not consumed by it. Because elevation without preparation is a trap. But when God has molded your character in private, your public rise becomes a testimony, not a temptation. People see your fruit, but they don't know the crushing. They see your glory, but not your Garden of Gethsemane. There will always be those who question your rise. They will say you don't deserve it. They will wonder how you made it past their limits, their predictions, their sabotage. But that's the point. They weren't meant to understand it. Because it wasn't their decision. God didn't take a vote before he promoted you. He doesn't need earthly approval to establish heavenly plans. When he lifts you, it confounds the proud. It disarms the critics. It exposes the limits of human influence. And it humbles even you as you realize this is not because of me. This is grace. This is mercy. This is divine orchestration. And often God elevates you through what was meant to destroy you. The very trial that was supposed to silence you becomes the platform for your voice. The wound becomes the witness. The loss becomes the lesson that fuels your leadership. This is why the elevation is public. Because the suffering was public. God makes sure the same people who watched you fall are there when he lifts you. Not out of revenge, but redemption. So that they too might know what it looks like when God restores what man tried to ruin. Elevation also comes with responsibility. When God places you in public view, it's not for display. It's for assignment. He elevates so that others may see what obedience looks like. He puts you on the mountain not to be admired, but to shine light. You become a city on a hill, not flawless, but faithful. And your story becomes a mirror, showing others that God is still in the business of reversing verdicts and rewriting outcomes. Your life becomes a signal. Still chooses. God still lifts. God still remembers the forgotten. There will be moments when your elevation feels overwhelming. The attention, the weight, the expectations. It may all feel like too much. But that's when you remember, you were never elevated by your own strength, and you won't stay elevated by your own strength. The same God who placed you there will keep you. Your job is not to protect your platform, but to steward it. Stay low in spirit, even as he raises your position. Stay grounded even as your name grows, because the same God who lifts can also humble, and he does both in love. In the end, public elevation is not about proving people wrong. It's about proving God right. It's about revealing the goodness of a God who lifts the lowly and defends the overlooked. So when he raises you, walk in it boldly, not boastfully. Walk in it with the knowledge that your rise is not a reward, it's a responsibility. You are not on display for admiration. You are on assignment for transformation. Let your elevation, let it declare what words never could. This is the Lord's doing, and it is marvelous in our eyes. There is a divine reversal that happens when you place your situation fully in God's hands. You stop trying to untangle the web of betrayal, the knots of confusion, or the alliances formed against you, and you let God deal with it. You stop responding to every whisper, stop defending yourself in every room, and stop chasing explanations from people who've already made up their minds. And as you step back, something strange begins to unfold. The alliance that once seemed so strong, the group that plotted, gossiped, and pushed, begins to crumble. Slowly, subtly, and sometimes suddenly, they start turning on one another. And you realize you were never meant to fight them. God planned to let them implode from within.